Croeso, good afternoon and welcome to English GCSE revision with Mrs. Thomas. Today she's looking at higher tariff questions and in particular focusing on synthesis, comparison and how, giving you some top tips on approaches that you can use to help improve those sorts of answers. So if you're ready, Miss, over to you.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone. We're just going to go through some reading questions again this week, but just the higher tariff reading questions. So these are the reading questions that that give you more marks on the paper. Okay, so a few introductions first of all. So my name is Mrs. Thomas. I'll be presenting the lesson today. Miss Bethel's also available during the lesson to answer any questions you may have through the session. So please feel free to use the Q&A function to ask questions. We did have some issues with that last week, but I believe they've been resolved this week. So hopefully we should be okay with that. The session is approximately 40 minutes long, but it might go on for a little bit longer. I know you may have other lessons to go to, so it will be recorded. If you feel like you miss anything, you can go back and watch the lesson again. Okay, so we'll get started. The learning objectives today then, I want you to be able to understand what a high tariff question is on the Unit 2 and Unit 3 English language papers. You will understand how to find answers for these questions and how to structure a response to them. And you'll be able to hopefully respond to a 10-mark question such as a synthesize, a compare and a how question. So these are the longer questions, a little bit trickier to answer, but obviously because of that they get you more marks on the paper. Okay, so first of all then, as I've gone through already, a high tariff question, it's normally worth 10 marks. The ones below 10 marks are normally, we class them as lower tariff questions. They rely on your understanding of the text, but also your inference skills. So whereas the lower tariff questions rely on you reading the information and picking out the information from the text, these higher tariff questions, they do rely on your inference skills and how you interpret those texts. Now, answering these questions is really important. Leaving them blank will definitely result in a lower grade on the paper overall. So if you miss 10 marks off the reading paper or the Unit 2 or Unit 3 paper, then the likelihood is that you'll go down a grade. You won't achieve a higher grade. Okay, so first of all, what's a synthesized question? So the word, it is a little bit tricky this, and sometimes as teachers it's not really clear what the exam board are asking, but the way it's interpreted is that synthesize, it requires you to pull information together from 2 or more texts in relation to the question being asked. So you need to read 2 texts probably. Sometimes they might give you 3, but it's very unlikely. You should look at each text individually and find evidence from each which answers the question. And then you do not have to comment on similarities or difference. So this is where it's different to a compare question, which I'll show you in later on. It is different to that because you don't have to comment on similarities or differences at all. You're just going through the text and finding information that answers the question. Okay, so a little plan for you when you first look at the questions and you decide what you're going to do. So first of all, you check how many the marks the question is worth. So with a synthesized question, it's normally 10 marks. That's no lower than that. You highlight the keywords in the question to ensure what it's asking you. Perhaps find synonyms for the words that it's looking for. You track through the text, highlighting evidence that answers the question. So each of the texts, you would track through them and find your evidence. You then, when you're responding, this is my suggestion. Okay, I have put at the top there a little bit of a disclaimer. There are several different ways you can set out a synthesized response. This is the one that I use with my students. Your own teacher may recommend a completely different structure, so please bear that in mind. Obviously, if you've got 2 alternatives, you might decide one is better than the other, so it's entirely up to you. Now, what I ask my students to do is use headings for each text you're being asked about, and make at least 2 points under each heading. So if it's a 10-mark question, which it generally is, you'll have to ensure you have 10 points in total in whatever combination. So say, for example, you have text A and text B. For text A, you may have 5 points. For text B, you could have 5 points. Or in some circumstances, you might have 4 points for text A and 6 points for text B. So whatever combination makes 10 points. You need to support your points with evidence, and you need to try use the keywords of the question in every point. This question is very similar to an explain question, which I went through last week. If you did miss last week's lesson, you can go back and watch it on the recording, but it's very similar, the structure, to an explain question, but you get in information from 2 different texts. Okay, so here we have the question that we're going to focus on. So it's a text about activities that the writers describe. So there's 2 texts, so text D and text E, and it wants you to synthesize the feelings of the writers to the activities they described. Okay, so this is the focus of the question. You need to look for points in the text to answer the question. So you're looking at the feelings of the writers, how they feel about their activities. Okay, and I've just re-emphasised there, the question does not ask you to compare. So you collate similar ideas together if writers make the same point, but you can use a combination of the evidence and your own thoughts on the text when explaining. Okay, so if you believe that the writers feel in a certain way, that's your personal feeling towards that text, but you need to make sure that you're succinct, so you're limited to time, and it is 10 points that they're looking for, so you need to make sure that your points are direct. Okay, big thing now, you need to make sure you're answering the question. It's so important. Okay, so in this example, as we said, your points need to relate the 2 writers' feelings to the activities they describe. So that's really important. You are focusing in on their feelings. Okay, so I'm going to show you 2 little snippets really of the 2 texts that were in this question. So text D is taken from an internet blog written for families by Paul Birmingham, and it's about kite flying. So the joy of kite flying, who knew? Homemade heaven. Earlier in the year, my kitelessness ended when the family and I attended a local kite festival. Apart from it being an awesome spectacle with giant octopus, sharks and dragons filling the skies, a spectacle so good it kept my kids away from the flashing swords and ice cream sellers for a record-breaking half an hour, we got to make our own kites. For just a couple of pounds and the assistance of some friendly folk on the stand, the children had their very own kites, and it was time to give them a go. And then we've got Texty, which is adapted from The Mountains of My Life, a collection of autobiographical writing by famous mountaineer Walter Bonatti. So he is talking about, you know, how he climbs mountains and what he says about that. So I was living in Italy in the years after the Second World War. They were hard times too for a boy with no prospects facing life in a defeated country. It was during those years that I came to know and love the mountains. And despite the fact that in those days I only went by the paths, I couldn't help but be fascinated by the spires and crests of a beautiful peak on which, with wonder and envy, I used to see climbing ropes at work. I would stand for hours on end watching those lucky people, then try to imitate them only a few feet from the ground on a nearby boulder. Okay, so what I want you to do now is try and get involved with the lesson if you can. So you can use the Q&A to put your answer on there. So I want you to identify what the writers feel about their activity. So just a quick overview of what they feel about each of their activities. So you can type your answer in the chat now. Miss, could you have a look and check if anyone's engaging there?
I've got control of the chat today, Miss.
Okay, excellent.
But I can't see any at the moment.
Okay. So we'll give them a few more seconds, I suppose, because we're going to run out of time otherwise, aren't we? So all you need to put is it positive? Is it negative? How do they feel about their activities that they're describing? Any responses, Miss?
No, and I'm sure that's not just me today, Miss, either.
Okay, well, we'll move on, guys, and then...
Oh, hang on. Yeah, we've got one answer here. Thank you very much, Bex. It says, text D, it's fun and exciting, a good day out.
Brilliant, yeah.
And then someone else has said they both believe these activities are great and positive. Yeah. And then Anonymous has said, awesome, positive, breathtaking and fun. And I've remembered to publish them this time as well, Miss.
Excellent. Thank you very much, guys.
Positive as well, a positive.
Yeah, so exactly, you get the idea that both of these texts are positive. So, you know, we're not identifying differences in the text. We're asking, we're focusing on the feelings of the writers and the activities they describe. So the two quotations I've picked out in those, so we need to find evidence in the text. So the first extract, it says the joy of kite flying. Who knew? So that writer obviously enjoys kite flying because he talks about the joy. So the word joy, you know, makes us think that he's enjoying himself. And then an awesome spectacle. So the way that the kites look when he's looking up at the skies, they look amazing. You know, they've got giant octopus, sharks, dragons filling the sky. So that what he sees is amazing. So he feels really enthralled by it. And then the second one, Mountains of My Life. So the title Mountains of My Life gives it a personal touch. He's talking about his life and how those mountains are connected to his life. So obviously he does feel a lot about them. He feels a connection with them. And then the other quotation I've used there is fascinated by the spires and crests of the beautiful peak. So again, he's in awe of the sights that he sees. Okay, so he can see these mountains, he thinks they're fantastic, and he wants to be able to climb them. Okay, so this is how I would set out a response for a synthesized question. As I've said, there are different ways you can do it. This is the one that I use with my students, and it has been successful. So first of all, I would take the first text, so I would put a subheading, text D, and then I would start my really explain structure of the text. So firstly, text D states, the joy of kite flying, who knew, which suggests that Paul Birmingham feels an unexpected pleasure from kite flying. So the fact that it says who knew, he's surprised by the fact that he feels enthralled with this hobby. Okay, and you notice that I've got feels in the response because I'm focusing on the feelings of the writers. Text D again, so additionally, Birmingham promotes kite flying as an awesome spectacle, which implies that he's amazed at what he sees, and again, he feels the kites are incredible to watch. Now, you'd have about 5 points for each of these texts, as I said, or you could have 4 and 6, 3 and 7, as long as you've got at least 2 for each text, but a total of 10 points. So then I'd go to text D. Obviously, I'm not going to give you 5 points for each tonight because I haven't enough time. So I'm just giving you 2 examples here. Text D then. So firstly, Bonatti uses the title The Mountains of My Life, which suggests his personal connection to the mountains and what they mean to him. He feels they are part of his life. And then secondly, the writer is fascinated by the spires and crests of the beautiful peak, which implies that he's passionate about the mountains and feels excited by how they look. So again, I've got my feels verb in there because I want to show the examiner that I understand what the question is, and that's what I'm focusing in on. So just some easy things to remember then. Use connectives to introduce your point. So firstly, secondly, furthermore, additionally, moreover. Remember, you need to have 10 points in total as it is a 10-mark question. Okay, so those are your two takeaways from this, you know, and also I'd say use text D as your titles or whatever, you know, the texts are called. Okay, so that's the synthesized structure. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to note them on the Q&A, and Miss will tell me and stop me and ask if you know, there's any questions you need to have answered. Okay, Miss, is that okay?
Yeah, we're all fine at the minute, Miss.
Excellent. So we'll move on to comparison then. So again, a little bit tricky, these questions. So with these questions, the aim is for you to be able to read 2 or more texts and find things which are similar or different. The text will always be about the same or a similar theme and will usually have different opinions. So just to make sure that you are able to find some differences and some similarities, they will normally have different opinions of whatever they're talking about. Remember that similarities or differences should always relate to the question. Okay, so again, I've done a structure there of what I think, or the way I would structure a response. Okay, so first of all, you find out how many marks the question's worth. So 10 points normally for comparison question. 10 marks, sorry, so you're looking for 10 points. Again, you highlight the keywords in the question so that you understand exactly what the examiner's looking for. You track through the first text, highlighting evidence that answers the question. And then again, similar to the synthesize, I would write down a heading of text D, and then write down your the answer for your first text, including evidence and explaining it in relation to the question. And then you track through the second text, highlighting evidence that answers the question. Write down a heading for the second text, text E, and then write down your answer for the second text, including evidence and explanation in relation to the question. And then, now this is going to be a little bit controversial because not all teachers will ask you to do this, but this is the way that I've found helps my students. I would then do a subheading of compare and write down at least 2 comparisons using the evidence and explaining it in relation to the question. And I know it's a little bit complicated, but I will show you an example of this again. You should aim to have 10 points in total. So for example, whatever structure, I'd try and have 2 points, at least 2 points for each. So text D 4 points, text D 4 points, compare 2 points, or you could have 3, 5, 2, whatever it is, or 4, 3, 3, whatever combination you feel compares the text best for you when you're reading them. Okay, so comparison question here. This is a text, the text about people getting a pet dog. Okay, so text D and E are written by new dog owners. Compare and contrast their experience of bringing a dog into their lives. Okay, so 2 texts are being used here. You must make these texts clear in your answer. So if you don't put a subheading for text D and text E or whatever, you need to make sure that you are commenting about which text you're referring to. You need to make that clear. So text D says, or Dilger, the author of the text, writes, whatever it is. You need to look for similarities and differences in the 2 texts. These 2 texts are polar opposites, but you need to make this clear. So when we look at these 2 texts now, or extracts from them, you'll see that their opinions are opposite, but you need to, you know, try and make that clear. So that's one of your comparison points. Okay, so spotting the different experiences they have had by finding evidences alone is insufficient. To compare their experiences, students must probe, explore, explain what it's like for each dog owner. Okay, so you need to really look at text D, find out what they think of being a dog owner, look at text D, find out what they think of being a dog owner, and then compare the 2. It's not enough to, you know, just have like one person says it's negative, one it's positive, one person writes formally, one person writes informally. It's just not enough. You need to have that evidence. You need to be able to explain it. And again, you know, big ask here, make sure you're answering the question. So your points need to relate to the two writers' experiences of bringing a dog into their lives. You need to really focus in on the question. Okay, so we'll look at some extracts from the text. So first of all, then, extract D, a newspaper article gives us Indian Knight's views on owning a dog, and this is the extract that I've chosen. I think I'm in love. This summer, Indian Knight got a puppy. Cats are all very well, she says, but if you want to be a better person, get a dog. Dogs, on the other hand, are enthusiasts. They love everything. They love walks, they love grass, they love leaves, they love sticks. They love running and jumping and eating and having naps. They are also the most extraordinary life enhancers. They're also brilliant companions, and I say that as someone who lives with 5 other people. They don't merely tolerate being stroked or petted. Dog trainers will tell you that for dogs, being patted or cuddled is even better than a delicious edible treat. They just love you and want to be happy with you. It's extraordinarily touching. I think dogs make you a better person. So that's Indian Knight's view of owning a dog. The next one is written by a new dog owner who has experienced some negative dog behaviour, and his name is Dilger. His surname is Dilger. How Dash the Greyhound wrecked my home. Another sleepless hour, and Sarah whispered, "Look, we've got to go down before she hurts herself." And it was then we discovered the devastation in the conservatory. Dash was standing panting feverishly on the table. The paint was scratched, the chair backs gnawed, a plant pot smashed to pieces, and an electric flex bitten in half. Dirt was strewn all over the floor. A standard lamp leant precariously against the wall. The table and chair legs are covered in a rash of tooth marks, with several chunks completely missing. The scratches on one side of the door looked like they'd been made by a saber-toothed tiger or a dinosaur. It took just an instant to take all this in, as my eyes were so wide with horror and fear. Okay, so in the chat again, I want you to pop in there what your first impression of these two texts is. What's the main difference or similarity? So you might type text D is whatever it is, whatever you think she's saying about owning a dog. Text D, what is this writer saying? Okay, so Miss, can you monitor the chat for me, please?
Yeah, I can. Nothing again has come through yet. I don't know if it takes a few moments for it to come through.
It seemed to be delayed before, didn't it?
So we've got text D is a very positive experience, whereas text E is negative. Well done on that. I think that was Bex. I've just posted that one. Excellent, thank you.
Anything else, Miss?
That's it for the minute, Miss.
Brilliant. Right, okay, we'll go through it. So the obvious similarity, the obvious difference in these two texts is that Indian Knight loves dogs. So her experience of owning a dog is, you know, it's the best thing she's ever done. Whereas text E, the writer there, Dilger, he's just, well, he can't believe how bad this dog is. So very, very different experiences, but that's not the only thing that, you know, we should compare. That's the obvious comparison, or the obvious difference rather.
Miss, what we've got here is Charlie said it's differently behaved dogs. And then Lucy says text D loves dogs and loves having one, is positive. Text E is a bad experience, isn't happy, is negative.
Yeah. Excellent. So it's a positive and negative. That's an interesting comment about the fact that they're very different dogs. You're quite right there as well. You know, so that's perhaps something you could pick up on as you know, a contrast. The fact that, you know, whereas this dog, you know, Indian Knight's puppy seems enthusiastic about everything. It loves to walk, it loves grass, it loves leaves, it loves everything. This other dog seems quite unhappy, doesn't it? So you could probably talk about that contrast as well. So well done, excellent. So we're going to have a look about at the structure that I have used then for a comparison question. Again, as I've said, this, you know, there's no right or wrong way according to the exam board, really, but your teacher will, you know, help you to structure a response in the best way for you. But please, you know, if you want to use this response, it's been successful, you know, with pupils in my school, but it might be that your teacher doesn't want you to use this in the classroom. So it's entirely, you know, up to your teacher, really. Okay, so text D. So here we go. So firstly, text D states, I think I'm in love, which suggests that Indian Night feels passionate about her dog and is in awe of it. Okay, so I'm using my evidence. I'm telling you which text it refers to because I've used my subheading, and I'm telling you what she feels about the fact that she loves her dog. You know, she feels passionate about her dog. Okay, secondly, Knight writes, I think dogs make you a better person, which implies how dogs benefit your life and how bringing a dog into your life is positive. So again, it's that positive thought about owning a dog. She thinks it's a really positive thing and it makes you a better person. Then I would go to, obviously I would have probably 4 points in there. I'd go then to text E. And I do the same thing then. So first, the writer used the title, How Dash the Greyhound Wrecked My Home, which immediately suggests that having a dog is a negative experience for this writer. The dog has caused destruction to his home. And then secondly, the writer talks about the devastation in the conservatory, which has been caused by the dog. This emphasises the destruction the dog has caused. Okay, so again, you know, I'm emphasising the fact that this dog is destroying his home and he's unhappy with the dog. And then I would write a subheading of compare, and then I would compare the 2 texts. So firstly, Indian Night is immediately besotted with her dog, stating, I think I'm in love. In contrast, Dilger immediately zooms in on the negative first night experience of how the dog wrecked my home. So he seems to focus on this immediate reaction, this knee-jerk reaction of the first night that the dog spent at home and how negative it was, whereas Indian Night seems to talk about the longer term. You know, she talks about how she takes it for walks and it shows her affection, it seems to love everything, but he seems to go no further than this first night. Okay, and then whereas text D is a positive account of owning a dog, text D is far more negative. Knight believes that dogs make you a better person, whereas Dilger talks about the devastation his dog has caused. Okay, so again, you know, I'm focusing on the positive and the negative there. Okay, there are other things you could focus in on. So we talked about that. You might talk about the types of dogs that they've got. If you think about, you know, her dog, you know, seems to just be happy, like we said before, which was an excellent point, whereas his dog, you know, seems very unhappy and unsettled. It doesn't seem to fit in really. Obviously, if you could see the full text, you'd be able to pick out other things as well. So I've just picked out some basic comparisons there. OK, so things to remember then, we're using connectives again in each of our points. We're using comparative language in our compare paragraph. So you could talk about both if they're similar. You could talk about similarly, whereas, in contrast, on the other hand, if they're different. OK, and remember you need 10 points in total as it's a 10-mark question. OK, so that's your compare question. If you've had any comments or questions on that, if you can pop those in the question and answer.
We're all right at the minute, Miss.
Okay.
There's nothing in the, there's no questions so far.
Brilliant. Right, I'll just have a quick drink and then we'll go on to the house. We should be able, OK for timing actually, so that's good. OK, so if you move on to the how question, again, these questions ask you to consider what's included in the text, so some evidence, you're getting evidence from the text, and again, how it's used in relation to the question. So you're looking at method or the technique of the writer. So how is the writer using the language or the techniques in the text to relate to the question that you're being asked. So you should select evidence and explain how the writer's using language or techniques. You should not technique spot. So for example, if you spot that the writer's using a simile, you can't just write the writer uses a simile. You need to, you know, be able to explain that. So why does that writer use a simile? What effect is that technique having in relation to the question? And as I show you now, this question is going to ask you to explain how the writer is using language to persuade you. So that's really important, that you can't just, you know, technique spot and say, well, they're using a persuasive device there. Well, how does that persuasive device or technique, a rhetorical question, for example, how does that rhetorical question add to their persuasion? How can it persuade you? So you really need to think about that. Okay, so again, we look at the text, so check how many marks questions worth. So normally a how question would be 10 marks, but I have seen how questions that are perhaps 5 marks. So however many marks the question is, that's however many marks points you need. Highlight the keywords in the question, so think about alternative ways to express the keywords, your synonyms there. Track through the text, highlighting evidence that answers the question again. Show how the evidence suggests an answer to the question. So we're looking at, you know, perhaps our tentative language here, where we're using suggests rather than shows. You don't know exactly, you know, what the text might be saying, but you can suggest perhaps, or you can imply how they're using persuasive techniques to influence the reader. You could include comments on words in a how question when it's relevant, because sometimes the language that's used, it warrants a further explanation, just that you can explain further to the examiner why those words or why that language might persuade you to do something. Okay, you can use keywords from the question in every point and use connectives again to start every point. So we're going to have a look at the question. So this is again is related to dogs. Okay, so how does the Dog Rescue Federation try to persuade you to support them? So the Dog Rescue Federation is a charity. So questions asking you, I'll show you the slide in a moment, but it's asking you to show how the charity is persuading you as a reader to support them. Okay, so persuade, this part of the question requires you to consider how you're being manipulated. So when you look at this leaflet, you're going to be you're asked to comment how the text makes you feel. So how are you being swayed to contribute to this charity? Okay, so again, make sure you're answering the question. In this example, your points need to relate to the language and techniques used to persuade you. Okay, so you as the reader, how is it making you want to donate to this charity? Okay, so if we have a look at the poster, you probably won't be able to see this as clearly as I would have liked, really, but the main part that we're focusing on, if you have a look here, is this part here. So the part that's in bold and the picture, and the part down here, these are the main areas that we're focusing on. This part here, it does have other things that you would use in an exam situation, but it's probably not as clear to you to see, so don't worry about that now. So what I want you to do is have a look at this. How is the text persuading you to donate to the Dog Rescue Federation? So can you type one way in which it's trying to persuade you? What are some of the techniques that are used here to try and make you want to donate to this charity? So Miss, I'll leave that with you to try and see if they put anything in the chat there.
I will, I'll feed anything through, Miss, that's put in. So you after specific techniques, Miss?
Perhaps techniques or just words, the language.
Or words, phrases, examples, okay.
Yes, a language, you know, you might look at, you know, the pictures that they have on there. How could the pictures persuade you?
So we've got some facts and statistics.
Brilliant, yeah.
They use the picture.
Yeah.
This is a good explanation from Bex. The picture shows puppies that are dirty, small, helpless, and brings out sympathy for the reader.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you. That's brilliant.
And then again, facts and statistics.
Yeah. Okay, if you look at the picture, you know, I'm glad, was it Bex who picked up on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm on the picture there. If you look at it, I know it's quite difficult to see, but the puppies, they do look a bit sorrowful, and they're also in a bin, okay, which is quite a bleak picture, isn't it? You know, it's showing us how, you know, they've just been, and if you look at the word on there, it says dumped. You know, these puppies have obviously been put in a bin. That's what it's implying. So it does, you know, play on our emotions and make us feel sorry for them.
And then we've got Miss Charlie said about they use statistics to show how much they need help.
Yep. Yeah. Anything else, Miss?
That's it on that one, I think, Miss.
Excellent. So I've got some things here then. So I've picked up on some of the language that's used. So it tells that these innocent animals are unwanted and therefore put to sleep. So if you look here on this slide, it says at least 11,000 perfectly innocent dogs were put to sleep for no other reason than they were not wanted. So the word innocent, you know, is quite an emotional word. You know, it plays on our emotions. They've done nothing wrong, these dogs. It's these people who've taken on these dogs and then realised that perhaps they don't want them anymore. You know, they've done nothing wrong, but yet they're the ones who are suffering. They've been put to sleep. Okay.
Lucy's picked up, Miss, on the idea about there being emotive language.
Lovely. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so I've picked up there, just like you all did, well done. So use of statistics, so 11,000 and 127,000 reasons to highlight the enormity of the problem. So I think someone picked up on that, the fact that when they're using statistics, you know, that big number right at the top, 127,000 reasons to change the law. You know, so it's giving us numbers, you know, it makes it more realistic. It's facts, isn't it, that we can relate to perhaps. Then we've got the use of the bold statement dumped, show a total lack of compassion. So as I said there, you know, they've been dumped in a bin. You know, it's quite you know, they've been thrown away. You know, it's awful, it's tragic, you know, again, playing on our emotions, emotive language. And then finally, the use of the picture, puppies in a bin, plays on our emotions. We talked about that. And then at the bottom there's a clear website address for easy navigation to extra help. So the website address stands out to us just the same as the statistics at the top. It stands out to us, so it makes it easy for us to look on that website and perhaps donate. So it persuades us to have a look on that website.
And Lucy, Miss, has just come in with colours and bullet points and short sentences. So I don't know if you want to think about colour connotations, Miss, or anything like that as well.
Yes. So perhaps, you know, the use of the fact that they've used, you know, the colour red, you know, that could be relating to certain things. You know, you could relate it to, I know this is quite horrific really, but blood, you know, blood is red. They're losing their lives, these dogs. You could talk about danger, you know, red being related to danger, you know, so all of these things. And it is very red, white and black, isn't it? That photograph is in black and white, you know, so it makes it even more tragic almost. You know, these dogs have no colour to them. They've no life to them. OK, so I'm going to show you how to structure response. I'm aware that we're running out of time now. OK, so response structure, so very similar to the explain structure, comparison structure, the synthesized structure. So we're going to use evidence from the text and we're going to explain it. OK, so first the text uses a picture of puppies in a bin to persuade people to support the Dog Federation to donate. The picture implies the puppies are mistreated and plays on the reader's emotions. Secondly, the text tells us that innocent dogs are unwanted and put to sleep. This persuades the reader to donate to the Dog Federation as it convinces them that the dogs have done nothing wrong and makes them feel sorry for these poor animals. So you'll notice in each of my points, I'm using those key words. This persuades the reader to donate to the Dog Federation. Those are the words that were in the question. Those are the words that we need to use in the response to make sure that we are focusing our efforts on that question and the examiner knows exactly what we're answering. Okay, so that examiner knows that we are answering this question correctly. Okay, next one. Additionally, the text uses a bold statement, dumped, to show a total lack of compassion, which then persuades people to donate to the charity. The word dumped, this is where I've commented on a word because I think this word's really significant. It suggests the abandonment of the dogs and the throwaway nature of the people who don't seem to care about them, that should say. It's a typing error there, sorry. And then finally, furthermore, the text uses statistics to persuade people to donate to the Dog Federation. The use of 11,000 and 127,000 reasons highlight the enormity of the problem and perhaps how desperate the situation is. Okay, so again, I've commented on those statistics, which are things that you all picked up on. Obviously, I would have 10 points there because there's 10 marks available. So I would try and find 10 points or as near to 10 points as possible. So again, just as a reminder, use your connective to introduce your points. Use evidence from the text with an explanation of what the evidence suggests and how it persuades. You can also comment on words to explain further. So if some of the words are significant, you could comment on those. And remember, you need to have your 10 points in total as it is a 10-mark question. Okay, so that's your how question complete. I know it's been a bit of a rush, but hopefully you'll be able to have a look at the recording and see if there's anything that you missed. You can watch again there. Okay, so I've just gone through the learning objectives. These were our learning objectives again at the beginning of the lesson. So understand what a high tariff question is on the Unit 2 and Unit 3. So we went through the fact that it's a synthesize, a compare, a how question are the ones I went through. There are other ones as well. There are impressions questions. You might have a 10-mark explain question. So you need to be aware of those, but the responses and the way you set them out are very similar. Understand how to find the answer to these questions, how to structure a response. I hope I've guided you through that. And then respond to a 10-mark question such as synthesize, compare and how. So again, hopefully I've responded to that for you and you're able to do that. Okay, so finally, feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A. Next week's session will focus on the writing questions on the Unit 2 and Unit 3 language papers. And as I said before, the sessions are all recorded. You'll be able to access them again in the future. I think they will be on the website. Okay, but if you have any questions, then please feel free to use the Q&A on the system there, and we can try and respond to those for you. But other than that, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and I'll leave you to perhaps move on to any other sessions that you want to join. Are there any questions coming up, Miss? Is there anything you would like to add?
No, they're okay. They're all done, I think, Miss. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you next week for some writing top tips.